Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Today is April 5th, 2010. Jackie, may we have roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Ajemian?
Present.
Commissioner Armenian?
Present.
President Chan?
Present.
I'm sorry, yes. Commissioner Chan, I'm sorry. Commissioner Miller?
Present.
And President, yeah.
Present. We have the next item, please.
Okay, consent items, approval of the revised January 11th, 2010 regular meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the January 11th, 2010 regular meeting minutes as revised.
Any comments?
I second.
A second? Okay, we have a second. All in favor of approving item 2A and B?
Aye.
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 Motion is approved.
Just for purposes of clarity, the motion as spoken by Commissioner Miller was just on item 2A. So just for clarification purposes, let's entertain a second motion on item 2B.
Okay. So is there a motion for item 2B?
I'll make a motion that we approve the special meeting minutes for February 8th, 2010.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Next item, please.
Presentations. Our first presentation is of the GWP 100-year certificate. Presenting will be Tara Goraya, District Director, Senator Carol Liu's office, 21st District.
Hi. Unfortunately, actually, Tara will not be able to join us today, but I'm here. My name is Casey Lowe. I'm the district representative, so I'll be presenting the resolution. Just on behalf of State Senator Carol Liu, it's a pretty big resolution. But on behalf of the State Senator representing the 21st District, it is my honor and pleasure to present this resolution from the State Senate to the Glendale Water and Power Commission for your 100th anniversary. For these past 100 years, the Commission has made tremendous contributions to the city of Glendale, and we appreciate all the work you've done as a community-owned and controlled public utility commission. You've allowed the people of Glendale to have a say in the delivery of their utilities, and I know the commission has also produced some very progressive work on reducing our carbon footprints and improving our environmental policy here in the city, and that is something that the senator is also she's a huge supporter of that, and so we thank you for all the work you've done. On behalf of the senator, please step up to receive the resolution. President?
This way, right? Oh, this way.
Thank you. Casey, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, our next award is the RPP or RP3, Reliable Public Power Provider Award. Mr. Ramon Abueg.
Good afternoon, President Yao, members of the Commission. Ramon Abueg, Assistant General Manager, Glendale Water and Power. Today, I'm proud to present to you that we have been recognized by the APPA as one of the RP3 provider. RP3 meaning Reliable Public Power Provider. On March 29, which is a week ago Monday, we were one of 94 utilities who received recognition as an RP3 provider. What is RP3, you ask? RP3 is actually one of those that we are really, really proud to receive as a public power utility. American Public Power Association, or APPA, has over 2,000 members. Of the 2,000 members to date, there's only less than 300 members who have received this recognition as an RP3 or Reliable Public Power Provider. This year, there were 94 members that were recognized. 6 received diamond rating, 59 received platinum, one of us is in the platinum, and I'll explain how we missed it by so many points to become a diamond member. And till 29, I received gold membership. As an RP3 member, it demonstrates management's commitment to safety, reliability, and to our employees. And I was explaining that throughout the presentation as to what that means. So that's the RP3 process is a very rigorous process. The application, kid you not, is yay thick. And I want to acknowledge Sanjay Mehta, who's over here. He spent a few weeks, maybe months, trying to fill out the application. So normally, just to give you the severity or how important this is, in other utilities, they have a team of people just filling this application out. We have one person that dedicated his time in getting this done. So I thank him for that. And there are several categories that we had to complete or satisfy in order to get this recognition. The whole process is actually a good planning book. We can use that for a self-check for us. We use that as well for benchmarking. And whatever we lack as we go through this application, we use that as well for making capital projects, some improvements in the programs that we have. So it helps us really establish a good benchmark, even though we already have them. It's a good way to verify them on safety, reliability, system improvement, which is our infrastructure projects, as well as workforce development. And once we're done with this, we can use this document as a reference whether or not we need to maintain the direction we're going or use this to make some improvements if we need to in any of these categories. So the criteria, there were 4 different categories, as I mentioned, and these are the rankings or the scoring. System improvement is 20%. Reliability is 30%, workforce development is 25%, and safety is 25%. So in order to get diamond rating, we have to score 100 points total in these categories. The different benchmarks or different categories, reliability is one of the category. As you know, we report here on a regular basis that we're tracking our indices for reliability, how well we're doing that. And what they're looking for in order to score well in this category is not that you're benchmarking it, but you're also showing that you're making improvement in the categories. And we successfully demonstrated that, as we've shown this, I think, on a regular basis, that we continually make improvements in our system outages. And so it has to be demonstrable improvement in our indices, and we're able to do that. The other one is in disaster planning. They look for, do we have a good disaster plan? Do we have a formal disaster plan? Our first disaster plan was created in 1999. We demonstrated to them that we review and update this as needed. We show them progress, and every time we made some improvements. And one of the things that I think that helped us too is during the avian flu and the swine flu, the epidemic, we're able to update the plan to show that we can react or we can continue to operate if we are able to, or if we're hit with this disaster. So they look for those. It's not just an annual review, but if some condition changes, are you able to upgrade your plan? The other one that they're looking for is in case there's a major disaster like an earthquake in this region and our utilities damaged, can we get aid from other utilities that are not in this region? So they look for agreements that we have with other agencies, and we have multiple mutual aid agreements. Some of those are with the APPA itself. That means we can call on any of the 2,000 members to help us out through that mutual aid agreement. We have an agreement with CMUA, or the California Municipal Utilities Association. We also have an agreement with the California Emergency Utilities Association. So we can call on those utilities, and we've demonstrated we also have established personal contacts with several other utilities that can come in and help us during a disaster. And the next one is reliability. You may or may not have heard the latest development, which is through the WECC, the Western Energy Coordinating Council, or through NERC as well, about the new reliability requirements. They wanted to see that, one, we've registered, that we have a registered entity, that we will follow all the reliability requirements, that we have a good cybersecurity plan, that would meet the requirement. We certify, in fact, every 6 months we have to certify that we are in compliance with these requirements. That we participate regularly in meetings, actively participate in what they call the users groups meetings. We have to demonstrate our attendance in those. And most importantly, do we participate in development of some of these standards. We're members of, this is a long acronym, the BESDTF Task Force, which stands for the Bulk Electric System Definition Task Force. As simple as that, believe it or not, the reliability is in place, but they still don't have a clear definition of what a bulk electric system is. So we've been able to participate in that and sort of help out and clear out that confusion as to what a bulk system is. The other categories in safety, and we needed to be able to demonstrate that we have a formal safety program. We do that by presenting to them the manual. And again, that gets updated regularly. They also look for, at least on the electric part, the electric side, is it consistent that our injury and illness prevention program that's in that manual, is that consistent with the electric industry standard? And we show that successfully that we do. We have regular meetings. We give our staff regular training on different safety requirements. And most importantly, we recognize the good practices if we accomplish certain milestones in our safety, that we do provide safety awards and recognition. We also send our safety officer to OSHA courses to make sure they stay in touch and stay current with OSHA requirements. And we do disaster drills such as evacuation, fire evacuation, earthquake evacuation as needed, to show that we are following the procedures that's in the manual. In the safety program as well, they look for, are the equipment that we're using, is it up to par? We're following standards. And we do, except for one, as you would see there, the defibs, or the defibrillators. They're looking for that each of our vehicles have defibs that we can use, so we don't have to rely on EMTs to help resuscitate an employee. That's one of the subtractions we had in the category. We were deducted 1 point for not having this device in a truck. As a result of that, Ned Bassin's group, our safety group, have developed a new policy. We're now looking at having our vehicles equipped with this device. So we just started a policy. We're now going through the motion of going through the process of having that done. They also look at whether or not we monitor our accidents and incidents. And are we doing corrective actions, whether or not they're preventable or non-preventable? If they're preventable, what are we doing to make sure that it doesn't happen again? We've demonstrated to them that we do that, and we do have a goal that's specified in our strategic plan that would like to have 0 vehicle accidents by July of this year, and hopefully reach a 2.0 incidence rate by 2014. Currently, we're actually pretty close to that. We're at 2.57, so we're getting pretty close. The other category is the workforce development. Very important to them is that we do a lot of networking, that our employees are participating in the different groups or associations that we are members of, such as SCAPA, which is the Southern California Public Power Authority, the APPA itself, the Western Underground Committee, and a bunch of other acronyms and associations that's out there. We had to show the actual attendance that we had, the people that were sending, and the level of participation that we have at these different groups. They also look for what kind of training or development we offer directly to the employees. We show to them the continuing education program, either through Glendale University or just sending them to have some continuing education units. So there's a lot of a variety of things to show that we do demonstrate that our employees would like them to develop. 30. Forward. Okay, there you go. And then, and how we're doing recruitment as far as of development. Are we using all the resources available to us, job fairs, community events? Did we go to high schools, community college? And when we do some of that, definitely in the trade associations, we're always actively recruiting. We also got some additional points, I believe, based on discussions we've had with them due to the Verdugo Power Academy. They thought that was a very creative way of trying to develop employees or GWP employees coming from the community. We do believe that that helped us some. And what you can see here under succession planning is we also got deducted 1 point that although we have succession planning, it's not a policy, it's not a formalized policy. We weren't able to produce that. We showed that we had gap analysis, we know who's retiring when, and how we plan to replace them, to retain. They're concerned about institutional knowledge. How are we documenting those, or how are we transferring those to new employees? Although we had some plans, it wasn't a formal policy. That's why they thought that needed improvement. So we got deducted 1 point for that. So again, they look for committee participation, not just attending the conferences. They want us to be able to show that we are active and contributing to the different committees to show that our employees are not only developing in their trade, but also helping others develop in the trade. So, and the system improvements, basically, they're looking for, do we have a formal plan? Do we have some sort of a long-term planning for infrastructure improvement? And as you know, we do that regularly. I think we do that very well. So we show to them that we do have a plan. It's budgeted. We've showed them progress, what we've completed, and where we need to do some more improvements. So that's very well documented. So to summarize, out of 100, we scored 98 points. We were docked 2 points for 2 areas, minor, but I know it broke my heart when we didn't have the diamond, but we'll get there. So, and what does RP3 really mean to us? It really demonstrates that our staff are committed to safety and reliable operation of the system, and that our staff have shown ownership and they're accountable for what they do. It also demonstrates, and we thank you and the city management for supporting the programs that we have. So, and the benefits of doing this, one of the most important benefits in these tough economic times is that we can use this to the rating agencies and demonstrate to them that we have a good management structure from the city level down to staff level, that the organization is well supported, and we can use this to actually help increase our credit rating. So that's it for that. And our next stop, our rating is good for 2 years. In 2012, we hope to get that diamond rating. And Mr. Steiger?
Well, first I'd like to congratulate Ramon and the entire electric division on achieving this award. It's prestigious in the world of public power. We're one of only 15% of all of public power entities within the country to receive the award. And while Ramon was a little upset that we didn't quite get the diamond, we are so close. In my mind, going from where we were just a few years ago to where we are today is extraordinary. So Ramon is to be congratulated, and so is every single employee within the electric division, because they all contributed at every single level. And I think you can see it. If you look at how it's graded, there's no area of the electric division that's left out. So everyone, in my opinion, should be congratulated. I congratulate Ramon, Sanjay for doing all the work, but everyone in the division. With that, I'd like to present this award to Ramon also. Come up, please. And our chairman. We'll have others.
Congratulations to you as well, Glenn.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are very impressive results. Thanks.
Can I ask a question? Quick question is, in the area of workforce development, do the people deciding or asking the questions ask anything about diversity in workforce?
No. That wasn't included.
They just talk about what do they measure? Just how we train?
Recruit, where we recruit, how we train, and what type of training we provide.
Thank you.
One more question. At the current time, what's our policy on hiring?
We are able to still hire and fill the positions that we need. Correct?
We are filling positions.
Yes.
We are? Okay.
Yes.
Just in the critical areas or pretty much across?
Pretty much across if
the
we
board?
can justify that we have a need for the position.
Okay.
We're not creating new positions, but as positions become vacant, we are filling them. That's good.
Okay, thanks.
And you mentioned that we were one of only 94 utilities to get the RP3. Is that correct?
This year, correct.
Okay, and out of how many utilities?
Out of 2,000 utilities.
So the 15% you quoted was
over. The RP3 has been around since for 5 years. This is the 5th year. So there's less than 300 who have received this recognition.
And you have the diamond rating, the gold rating. Are there other ratings? A silver?
Yeah, it's diamond, platinum, then gold.
Okay.
And nothing after that.
Okay. All right. So we were one of 94 out of how many again?
94 out of 2,000.
Yeah. So that's a very small percentage. Congratulations. It's quite an achievement. Thank you.
Oh, and Mr. Bragg, I read in the report that 6 of those were diamond rated. And out of curiosity, can you tell me who those 6 are that we're trying to become?
Those are fairly big utilities that got the diamond rating. I forget who they were, but when we checked, those were the big utilities got them.
Okay.
I think they have a lot of staff.
Okay. Yeah, we have one. Well, understandable. Congratulations again.
Right.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Reports information, strategic plan, quarterly report, scoreboard update.
Steiger?
What I'd like to do, rather than go through our scoreboard at this meeting, you've all been given a copy of our scoreboard, and plus you also have the most recent quarterly report. What I am suggesting is that at next month's commission meeting, I give a complete report on the entire strategic plan, plus an update on what we're doing right now to update the strategic plan. We've been going through a process for the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 weeks now to update the plan to represent where we are today. So by the next meeting, we'll have that in place. So I'd like to present it at that point. It'll be much more comprehensive, if that's okay.
That'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll go next item, please.
Okay, financial update and project management process. Mr. Bill Fox.
President Yao and members of the Commission and Mr. Steiger, today we're going to talk about the financial update, and that's going to take a look at where we are today and where we think we'll be at the end of the year, and then a little bit about our project management, which will include the process, but in addition we will cover where we are today and where we think we'll be at the end of the year also. So it has a financial component to it. The financial update portion is the first part of the presentation, and we're going to talk about the electric operations and isolate them, take a look at where we are with them. Secondly, we'll look at the water operations. And then the project management is broken down into 4 major pieces, the first being the process itself. The second, we'll give you an update on our capital improvement program, where we are today. And we're going to look at our closed capital projects for the last fiscal year. And this is to give you an idea of how we actually manage our projects, how well we do. And then finally, there's 3 major projects that we'll talk a little bit about today. Definitely am challenged on this, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried that, and it didn't. It did. Okay. As far as the electric operations, we have a snapshot here that takes a look at our 2008-2009 year end. And as you can see, last fiscal year we ended up with a net income position of $6.8 million on the electric side. So far, year to date, we've come in with $1.9 million through February 28th. That's the most recent recorded information we have. We've projected that out to the end of this year, so we've given you a projection based upon 8 months of actual and 4 months of projection. At the end of the year, we think that our net income will be roughly $800,000. And that's slightly less than what our annual budget is. And there's a couple reasons why we think we're going to be in a smaller position than we had anticipated, and that's one, our actual electric sales have gone down about 3.7%. So we've had less kilowatt-hour sales. And the second part of it is we did a rate reduction January 1st. If you recall, we had approximate 9% rate reduction. If you take those into consideration, that's what's caused our decreased position over where we had thought we would be. Next is the water portion of the business. And in the water portion of the business, last year we ended up with a net income of $1.6 million. So far, year to date, we're at $300,000 to the good. At the end of the year, we anticipate being roughly $700,000 up. If you take a note, our budget this last year, the 2009-2010 budget, we actually budgeted a loss position. So we're actually doing better than we had anticipated. And that's really quite remarkable in the fact that we have met our goals as far as water conservation. So far, in looking at our volume of water sales, we're down roughly 11%. So our sales are actually 11% less on a volume basis. So the conservation programs that we've been touting have definitely been a positive factor. The other part of it, I think, is the fact that the economy has had an influence on people as well as the weather's had an influence. Going away from the financial aspect of our operation for a moment and focusing on our project management, we thought it would be good to give you kind of a backdrop of our project management process. In 2004, there was a need identified to standardize the way that we manage projects at GWP. Prior to that, there had been different ways different people had done them, and it was determined that it would be good to have everybody working from the same set of facts and doing it the same way. So a standardized approach was developed. This approach included a development of a training manual as well as courses, basically coursework that went along with it to train everybody that was a project manager, engineer type person at that time. And there was a methodology that was developed for the significant activities, as you can see, for capital improvements, large projects, and then major maintenance or repair activities. So this project management process was infused to make sure that the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, even the short-term projects as well as long-term, are being addressed.
Excuse me. Can I ask you a question before you
Sure.
move forward with the project management?
Sure.
Back to electric utility revenue.
Okay.
Net wholesale revenues projected year-end 2009-10 is going to be 540, where actual 2008-09 was 1.8 million.
That's correct.
What is the cause for that decrease?
There probably are a number of different factors, but one of the things in the wholesale business is the actual competition that we have as well as the market itself. And the amount of money that we make is dependent upon the opportunities that exist in the marketplace. This is a program that we're trying to get up and coming and to be a larger portion of the contribution to the bottom line of the organization. As you know, it's still in its infancy, and we're still trying to get people on board. So we have not advanced as far as we'd like in this particular area, and so definitely an area that we need to focus on and grow, if you will.
Okay. And let me add one other thing. It is also a function of the economy because most utilities, like ourselves, were actually in a negative position, a minus position in terms of growth last year. There's that much less opportunity to sell into the market. As the economy starts to come back up again, there will be more opportunity. So it's a matter of timing also.
Right, combination of both.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And to maybe digress back to the projects for a moment, we've segmented the projects at GWP into two classifications. We have the Category 1 and Category 2. The Category 1 are the more complex ones where the beginning project scope is $500,000 or more. Project 2 are those under $500,000 because there are definitely more steps and more formality in the larger projects. The Category 1 projects, as you can see, are greater than $500,000, and we actually go through a fairly formalized process. We assemble a project team, which will include a project manager, and there will be other people that are part of the discipline that are involved in the project. A formalized project scope is developed, very detailed in nature, as well as a cost and schedule estimate are put together. When you're managing a complex project, we have monthly status meetings and status reports that are developed. And at the completion of the project, there is an overall debriefing that takes place to make sure that, in fact, if we've done a good job, that we recognize it and celebrate. If there's opportunities for us to do things better, we also want to focus on those as a lessons learned. Under the Category 2 projects, those are less formal. Oftentimes there will not be a formal project team in place. It may be assigned to one or two people to handle a particular project, but we still go through and develop a detailed project scope. A cost and schedule estimate are developed, and at the end there is a project completion report so that we can document our results. This flow chart is a rendition that's actually from our project manual that shows the various steps. And this is covering what you call a complex project or a Category 1 type project. And it takes you through each one of the steps in the process. And as you can see, the important thing of this is that there is estimates that are developed and they're reviewed by a team and they go through an approval process so that we have a good handle on the costs as well as the schedule before we actually initiate a project. The other thing that's important to know is that we have a monitoring process in place. That includes both from a schedule standpoint as well as from a dollar standpoint. So if things are beginning to get out of whack, we have a way to identify it and try to correct it before we have a condition that becomes of major concern. And again, I think the important thing at the end of the project is that we do debriefings, and we want to make sure that if there's something we can learn from, that we'll take that knowledge into our next project. We felt that since we talked about the process, it's probably a good idea to actually take a look at what our capital improvement program looks like. So this is what the capital projects look like. Our 2008-9, our total budgeted or actual costs were $52.7 million spent on capital projects. The electric utility 29.5 and our water utility 23.2. The actual year-to-date progress, we have spent 26.8 through 8 of our 12 months. Our projected at the end of the year is $70 million. And frankly, we think that that's probably a little bit on the optimistic side. And as we do our monthly project updates, we can get a better feel as we go through. Each month we get better and better at this. Our annual budget at this point is $86.2 million.
For the supply side, I see a $7.6 million projected to 09-10. Is that due to renewables?
A portion of it is, yes.
And what's the other portion?
There's other aspects that go into the supply, which includes the actual power production portion of our plant operation. So you're going to see a portion of the capital improvement that goes into the work that's being done at the Grayson Power Plant.
I see. Okay, thanks.
Your term allocated, could you elaborate what that means
Yeah,
for both the utilities?
Sure. Allocated happens to be, the majority of allocated relates to those aspects of the operation that are both electric and water where there's a sharing of the costs. Probably the largest portion of that is what's called our Utility Operations Center, or our Grayson Power Plant area, where both our electric and water operations share common aspects, for example, the warehouse and the training area. So there's a number of different components that we share together, so we call it allocated, and it's based on a 75% electric, 25% water allocation.
Oh, I see. Is that the difference between the two numbers then?
No.
Or those two numbers are different for other reasons?
Yeah, they're because of the way the costs are being expended.
Okay. You have under water utility, your total actually says total electric utility. I took it.
Yeah, I know. I saw that just now, too, and
Okay.
apologize for that mistake.
Okay, all right, just a typo.
We thought that it would be beneficial to take a look at our active capital projects and give you sort of a feel as to a breakout of the different components in the various areas. So if you can take a look at the electric utility, you can see it's broken out by the supply, the transmission area, and the electrical services. So there's a 55 total electric projects. And then for the water utility, there's 40. And at the Utility Operations Center, which is the allocated portion, there's 11 of them. So at this point, we have 106 projects that GWP is currently managing in these various aspects of our operation. To date, we've spent $26.8 million on those 106 projects. The annual budget is $86.252. And keeping in mind that anytime you're dealing with a capital project, you may budget it in 1 year, but oftentimes it takes more than 1 year to do a capital project and get it completed. So, in fact, those dollars will end up being rolled into the next year if the project hasn't been completed as fast as we initially thought it would.
One more question. Is smart grid included in one of these categories?
Yeah, smart grid is
Electrical?
included. It's primarily included in the electrical services section.
Okay, thanks.
And what about your expansion from, I think it was 4 kV to 12? Was that it? Is that under transmission? Or
That is primarily in the transmission area.
okay. Supply ticket means generation.
Yes.
Correct.
And how many of your 106 projects are Category 1, would you say?
If you hold that thought for just a second, I'll get to that. I think you're anticipating my next move.
Pardon.
In response to Commissioner Miller, I knew you would ask this question, so this slide is for you.
Thank you.
The Category 1 and Category 2 projects have been broken out here so that you can get an idea of the magnitude of each. So there's a total of 42 of the Category 1 projects. There's a total of 64 of the Category 2 for the total of 106. And they're broken down between the electric utility and the water utility, and again, our Utility Operations Center, which is the shared facility. We thought it would be beneficial to share with you, besides giving you a snapshot of what's currently going on, we thought from a project management standpoint it would be beneficial to take a snapshot at a point in time so that you could see the results of what we've actually accomplished. So for 2009, we're taking a look at all projects that were closed in 2009. So these are not currently active, but what if we were to draw a snapshot at a point in time? We completed 131 projects in fiscal year 2009. There was 108 in electric, and there was 23 in the water operations. The total dollar value of those projects was $35.6 million, with 31.2 being in electric and 4.4 in the water operations. Sure.
Quick question. This is actual cost, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you by any chance have a comparison? I think we discussed this briefly last time of what was the projected budgets and
Yes.
for these 131?
Commissioner Adam Janian, yes, I do. And I'll try to get to that in the next slide or so. And hopefully this will be in response to your question. There are 108 projects taking a look at the electric side of the business. And of those, you had 5 of the large projects, and you had 103 of the smaller projects, those under $500,000. If you take a look at the total budget for those 5 projects, it was $30.4 million. That's what the budget was according to the project budget. The actual recorded dollars for those projects was $26.1 million. So we ended up with a $4.4 million positive variance. So in essence, when you take a look at those 5 projects collectively, we actually underspent on those projects. So there was a 14% positive variance. On the smaller projects, the Category 2 projects, our results were not quite as stellar, but we still did a very good job. The budget was $4.2 million, the recorded was $5.1, and so there was a variance of $900,000, or a 21% variance. Some of the smaller projects are oftentimes harder to manage than the larger projects, and this is an area that we're going to continue to focus on to try to have a positive variance in that particular area. But if you look at the electric side of the business in total, if you compare all 108 projects, we ended up with a 10% positive variance, or we underspent by $3.5 million. So I would have to say that the electric side of the business did a very good job of managing their projects. We'll take a look at the water side of the business. In looking at the closed projects for 2009 for the water side of the business, there was 23 projects that were completed. The budget was $2 million for those Category 1 projects, and the recorded was $2.2 million. So on that, we had a 10% negative variance, or $200,000. On our Category 2 projects, we actually, in this case, had a positive variance. So they did a better job of managing the smaller projects, and in fact had a positive variance of $1 million, or in this case 31%. Overall, when you look at all the projects managed by the water group, there was 23 projects, and they had a positive variance of $800,000, or they were 15% better than the budget. So in this particular case, for this year, they did a fine job. Keep in mind that these examples that we provided to you were a snapshot at the end of 2009. And as I indicated earlier, that projects sometimes have multiple years. So we're just looking at things that were closed in 2009. They may have started in 2007 or 2008 or 2006. But in essence, we wanted to show you at a point in time, how did we do with the closed projects? And in this case, the water group did a fine job.
So these were projects that actually finished construction?
That's correct.
And this is in fiscal year 08-09 or calendar year?
That's correct, in the fiscal year 08-09, as the prior slide was for the electric group closed projects in 2008-2009. We tried to be responsive to your request of, well, how are you guys managing your projects?
Right.
We felt that this would be a way to demonstrate by taking a look at a snapshot in time, which the best way to do it is take a look at the end of a fiscal year.
I know you're not done yet, but I think this is excellent, and I'd like to point out that this data refutes the allegation that we've had gross mismanagement of projects in the city, or at least that's not correct in this utility. And I'd like to thank you, the director, and everyone else for that.
Thank you. We have 3 major projects that we'd like to just briefly touch on. These are the topics of when you take a look at the dollars and things that are important to GWP. Chevy Chase, Glorieta Substation, and then Smart Grid. And we'll spend a little time on the first 2. The last one we have a full presentation on, so I'm only going to give you kind of an overview, and then Craig Keenan will be giving you a much more in-depth presentation of the Smart Grid project and some of the project management tools that are involved. We have to keep in mind that with the Smart Grid project, it's a lot more complicated than anything we've dealt with before, and so there's additional tools above and beyond what we normally do that are in place to handle a project of this magnitude. The first project, Chevy Chase, was a very successful project of doing a replacement of our reservoir and pump at at the Chevy Chase location, which is at the golf course. The project budget was $32.5 million. Our project cost was $30.6 million. We had a scheduled in-service date of July 2009. What does that mean? That means that we anticipated being able to actually start using the facility in July of 2009. And we were actually able to do that. Our active in-service date was July 2009. So from a schedule standpoint, we met our schedule. But interestingly to note is we had a project completion date of April 2010, and the reason there's a difference in the two is there's oftentimes things at the end of a project that you can still get the project up and running and use it, but you haven't dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. And that's why this shows a project completion date of April 2010. One of the major issues, if you take a look at the after construction, has been the reseeding and bringing the golf course back up to the condition that it was before. And as you can see, it looks just like it did before. They did a fine job in bringing it back into the condition so that people could use the course. The second project is one that's, I would say, in the beginning stages, but it's a major one, and I know that periodically as we go through the construction process, you're going to be briefed as to the progress and so that you know that we're on schedule and that we remain within the budget. This is the Glorietta substation rebuild. Our total project budget is $13.1 million. Our current scheduled completion date is May of 2011, and our operation date is also May of 2011. At this point, our project is on budget and it is on schedule. We thought it would be beneficial for you to see the before renovation, and this is how it looks today. And then the slide on the left is on the right is an artist rendering of what it will look like when it's completed. There sure is a difference in the quality of the area, and for the residents that are in that area, definitely will feel much better about taking a look at the Glorietta substation.
Can I interrupt for a minute? The before renovation is how it was before, and actually, as it looks today, is none of the equipment is there. The equipment is gone as of today, and then all you would see would be the wall. So that's correct, right, Ramon? So it's all been dismantled.
A question, if I may. The photo on the right, was that, or the picture on the right, was that concept developed with input from residents?
I'm going to go ahead and have Ramon,
okay,
because this is his project and he knows the most.
Yeah, this was designed through collaboration with the Homeowners Association as well as with the Planning Commission or the Planning Group. As if you recall, we had the Starbucks concept when we started this, and this is more what fits into the environment. So we presented this to the Homeowners Association, and they were very, very happy with it.
That's very commendable. Thank you.
The last project is the smart grid, and frankly, this is one of the largest things that we've ever undertaken, if not the largest at Glendale Water and Power. And frankly, we're getting a lot of recognition throughout the utility world, and the reason is we're really one of the first to do this fully integrated water and electric smart grid system conversion, and it's a testimonial to those that are involved with the project. It's quite an undertaking when you think about 84,500 electric customers as well as 33,400 water customers will be converted through our project completion. The total estimated cost of this project is $71 million. We have secured a $20 million grant from the Department of Energy, so that brings our net cost down to $51 million. And the estimated project completion, which includes the full build-out and everything to the final completion, is currently at March 2015. But much like the Chevy Chase project that we talked about earlier, we will be in service prior to that time. But when we figure that all the requirements have been finalized, is March 2015. Currently, we're in process of doing a demonstration project. It's being built as we speak, which includes a meter data management system, which is the computerized portion of the project. And this demonstration project includes 1,000 electric meters, 500 water meters, and then there will be 300 home displays for people to try and give us feedback on how they think they work. This is, as I indicated before, is probably one of the most complex projects we've ever undertaken, and as a result, we've enlisted the services of KEMA Engineering, and we've hired a project manager through KEMA to help us through this process. The requirements of our grant with the Department of Energy has numerous reporting requirements that go with it. They're complex reporting requirements, and frankly, the experience that KEMA brings to the table will help us ensure that we have compliance not only with the quality of the reporting, but the timeliness of the reporting. The other thing that goes on with this project is that we're dealing with multiple service providers. We're dealing with more than just one contractor to put the components together, and as a result, it requires a lot of project management skills to make sure that we pull it all off. So all in all, this is probably the biggest thing that we have going, and we are doing what I think at this point an outstanding job by getting the community involved. We have excellent project management that's helping us through this process, and we're making sure that we stay on task to get the work completed in a timely manner. We are going to have a separate presentation, as I mentioned earlier on this, that will go into further details as to the various components of this project and some of the steps that we're taking to manage the project in a successful manner. And with that, I know you've asked questions as we've gone through, but if there's any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Any additional questions? Well, I just want to congratulate you on this great presentation. I think it's very insightful, and it tells a great story for those who had in the past questioned the project management skill of QWP and its staff. It shows that it is being managed relatively well, considering the variances. And so I commend you again on a great presentation. I have one question on the last slide. I know we're going to get a presentation on smart grid. The estimated project cost is $71 million for the smart grid. Is that taking into consideration the replacement cost? So we are replacing meters as we go along, not just replacing a good old meter with a new meter. Are we replacing old meter as part of the $71 million?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not being, like, some people might consider wasteful if we replace a good old meter with a new one, but we're not doing that. We are actually replacing old meters.
We're replacing all the meters in the system.
But as we move along, when a meter needs to be replaced, then we replace them with a new meter, right?
I don't know quite how to respond, but let me give it a shot. We're replacing all the meters in the system. The 84,500 electric customers will get new meters, so everybody in the system will get a new meter.
Craig can answer that.
Mr. President, Commissioners, my name is Craig Keenan. I'm the marketing manager. To your question on the water side, we've probably replaced 4,000 to 5,000 meters already. So what they'll get is a retrofit for the electronics to allow us to communicate two-way and read them, but the actual meters will not be replaced. But all the electric meters will have to be replaced because we don't have any two-way communication meters out there. So that's the answer. Electric, yes, all of them. Water, we will retrofit the ones we can.
But currently, as the customer needs a new meter, you would replace that with a new meter rather than an old meter, even though you're doing a pilot and do area by area. But if an area is not scheduled to have a new meter, you would still replace that needed meter with a new one, wouldn't you?
I don't follow.
Let's say if you're in an area where the new meter or a new system will be installed, but if it's in an area where it's not scheduled for a new meter to be replaced, would you still replace that one customer in a separate area with a new meter rather than an old meter?
Oh, well, we continue to upgrade meters in other areas while we're doing the demonstration?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah, with a new meter.
That would be a Ramon.
I'm sorry about this question, but...
Commissioners, Terry McDonald, I'm project manager. What we're doing when we pull out an old meter, we will save it and we will reuse it in areas where we need a meter replacement prior to the rollout of the new meters. And the reason for that is we're doing it on a route-by-route basis, and in order to be able to read those meters properly, we have to do it in that fashion. So we will recycle used meters when appropriate, and we have the suitable replacement during the installation period. But when we get to a certain route, they're all going to be new.
Okay, that's a good response. Thank you. Understand. Any comments here?
Yeah, a couple of more questions. On the summary of closed capital projects, I noticed that the biggest variance was a savings on the electrical. You saved $4.4 million on the Category 1. And I wanted to ask, do you think that your formalized process for the Category 1 might result in the increased savings that you experience there? In other words, suggesting that if you lowered the threshold for Category 1, you might be able to do better in the Category 2, or what's now Category 2?
Commissioner Miller, that's a good hypothesis. I don't think we've gotten to that level of detail to analyze it. One of the reasons I think we've fared better is that construction costs have actually come in some cases lower than we had originally anticipated, so that part of the benefit of our good fortune is the fact that costs to perform certain services have been a little bit less than originally anticipated.
Supply being in excess of demand because of the recession, I take it?
I believe that's the case.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
About to ask this. It's first of all, I think you guys did a great job in getting positive variances, but the real issue is, variance is a variance, whether it's positive or negative. It still has an issue with budgeting. So my thinking was the majority of the reason for this past year would have been because of decreased, not just material, but labor as well. I'm assuming may have come down as well. It'll be interesting to see how that moves forward.
Yeah. I think that the question that was broached to actually cause this presentation to be made is something that's very healthy, because it makes us take a look at how we report and how we manage our work. And this is something that we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis. So at the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate doing the same type of analysis to see how did we do this year at the end of fiscal year 9-10 versus our budget, to do a similar analysis as we did this past year, to see if the trend is the same or do we have some other corrections that we need to do internally.
I have another question. Before we decided to go smart grid, haven't we already installed some AMRs?
We do have some on large customers.
On large customers?
Large customers, that's correct.
And are those going to have to be changed as well? Or are they going to just be retrofitted?
The water meters can be retrofitted. The electric meters will have to be replaced.
Is that a huge cost, right? I mean,
no, it's not.
The
we had
AMRs.
A few thousand.
How many AMRs do we have?
A few thousand water. Well, how many? About 6,000.
6,000 AMRs.
They have to be replaced because they can't be upgraded to have the two-way communication in the in-home kind of. Because it's not just large customers. There's some residential in harder to serve areas where they had different problems with the meters. They wouldn't put those on there. They either would be locked up and they couldn't get to them to read them, or that kind of thing.
Okay. What do we plan on doing with these meters, old meters?
Old meters will be
just salvaged, or
yeah. You might be able to get something for the brass from the water, but I don't know about the electric.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
You have comments, questions? Commissioner Miller?
Yes, returning to your electric utility revenue expense summary. On your, let's see, got to go back a bit. You're on page 2, or on the booklet, page 2.
There you go.
Yes, there we go. I see in the difference between 08 and 09 for your total base rate revenue, you're about $3,500 off. And then on total adjustable rate revenues, it goes down to a $14,000 difference. Could you explain what the adjustable process means?
On the adjustable rate revenues on the electric side, what we did is we provided a 9% decrease in our overall rates.
Okay, so that's where that you mentioned that.
That's
where
the
it comes in.
9%
Okay,
in.
I was just wondering why it was so different there. And then also, I noticed on your general fund transfer that it's the same for this year as last year. It's not constant then in terms of percent, but constant in terms of absolute value.
It's constant in the sense that that's what the city council had agreed to, and that's
Okay.
what's been deemed by the city manager's office.
Part of our strategic plan was to do just that.
Right.
Was to levelize the number rather than keep it as a percentage.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you for that explanation. And then if I may go back again to the smart grid, on the opposite side of your report, page 16, wait till you catch up there. You have on the second to the last bullet there, you have a sub-bullet area, second bullet, multiple service providers. Is there a standardization that's going on among them?
I think I'm going to defer that question to our project manager, Terry.
Oh.
Help me to understand the question a little bit better.
You have multiple service providers, which I understand is different contractors
Correct.
doing the work. And there's a standardized guideline so that they're doing the work more or less the same?
We don't have multiple service providers doing the same kind of work, so that we have Itron to supply us software and the meters. We have UPA to do the installation. They're the only contractor doing the installation,
Okay.
et cetera.
All right. And then I take it when we complete this, there would be some kind of a report to the industry about our performance. Is that in the plans?
Yes. Well, and plus, with the DOE funding, we have pretty stringent reporting requirements anyway, in addition to that. So, yes, absolutely.
All right. Okay. I was thinking not of a report to regulators or those who loaned us the money, as just a report to other interested parties who might see the results so they can decide what to do. I think this would be of great interest to the industry generally.
Yeah, as it has been already, yes.
All right. Okay, thank you. That's the end of my questions.
Yeah, Mr. Steiker forgot to mention his conference that he attended. Maybe we can do that next meeting.
Next meeting.
Okay, so any other comments or questions? Now I'd like to invite, we have a request to speak on this item. I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Milano, please.
Thank you very much. Commissioners and city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. Mr. Yale, thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak before you. I have been, for the last few days, looking at consolidating the information, the financial information for the city of Glendale, trying to put together a 12-year running totals with regard to the way the city appropriates its funds. The problem that I have is that from year to year, they're bound to change something, with regard to how they allocate things and the placement of the various different funding. And I figure that if I have a good 12-year history, we're able to tell where the money is going with regard to these transfers to the general fund from the Glendale Water and Power. And you're right, it's been fairly consistent for the past few years, around $4 million for the from the water utility and around $18 to $19 million from the electrical utility. And my thought about these transfers has always been this. There has always been a concern to me that really understanding where the status of the capital assets of the utility have been and what's the state of those. About a year and a half ago, Director Steiger made a presentation in the community room at the police station, where he gave us a pretty good overall view of the status of the water mains. And from what I recalled, and this is not accurate, but it just shocked me at the amount of, or the number of miles of water mains that were incredibly old, over 60 years old. And so I tried to picture, well, how would that be presented in a way that allows us to say, this is how much capital, investment should be allocated in future years, and how long will it take to bring this up to what I would call some kind of acceptable standard. And I started thinking the same thing concerning the overhead lines and the other major assets of the city, including the power plants, because some of them are very old. So how is that depicted and presented on the financial statements that allows you to say, wait a second, the city should be allocating X amount of dollars every year, and according to this thing, it's insufficient? How would you know how to present that information or how to assess it? Because I tried to sit down and try to figure out, to see if from these documents I can get a good gauge of what it is. Because from what I have looked at, it seems that we have transferred way too much money to the general fund at the expense of the capital reserves that we should have built. And so now we find a couple of years ago have to get a bond issue in order to be able to do the most essential and urgent things that the city needed to do. And that changes significantly the way the funding and the original concepts of that Glendale has had concerning how it funds major capital projects. And so it is my hope that as these reports come into the future, that you're giving more of a quantitative analysis of the status of the assets in a way that is more clear to all of us.
Okay. Thank you. Comments? Thank you. Next item, please.
Electric reliability report. Oh, I'm sorry, smart grid update, Craig Keenan.
Come up.
Mr. President, Commissioners, Craig Keenan, Marketing Manager. I'm going to give you a brief update of where we're at with the smart grid. I'll cover a little bit about the grant process, the planning we have to do, reporting, things like that. So as far as the grant process, there was $9 billion dollars in grants requested. There were 600 to 700 applications. They awarded $3.4 billion. There was 100 recipients. There was 33 municipal utilities received grants, and we were one of the lucky ones. We got 20 million. It's a big thing for us. Why did we succeed? Well, in the comments that DOE supplied, it was evident that we had a compelling plan. We were prepared to move quickly to spend the money, and we were willing to comply with the rigorous reporting requirements that were going to come along with the grant process. A lot of these items were already covered in Bill Fox's presentation, but I'll quickly go through. We're going to be doing an AMI meter data management system that's replacing all electric and water meters. We're going to have a number of customer programs, in-home display programs, our thermal energy storage program, demand response program, and eventually in the last year or so, the grant we'll be looking at some new pricing programs.
Excuse me, Mr. Keenan. You mean the last one, innovative pricing program? Is that like a time of use type?
Yes,
program?
yes. But we need to collect some data and do some analysis before we could even begin to propose what those might be. There'll be a number of enterprise computer systems we'll be looking at. Installing enterprise service bus, our GIS system, asset management systems, outage management, and distribution management modeling software. And also we're looking at some pilot programs for feeder automation and substation automation. As far as the DOE reporting requirements, our first task was to submit to them a cybersecurity plan, which we did in the 31st of March. It addresses plausible threats, how we're going to protect the system, and the plan goes to DOE for approval, and then we have to implement it. We have to also supply a draft project execution plan, a detailed plan that provides program objectives, a work breakdown schedule, project schedule, time phase budgeting, risk management plan, explain our management structure, establish project baselines. We submitted this on the 1st of April. We're going to be developing, or we're in the process of developing, a metrics and benefits reporting plan. The purpose of this plan is to answer a number of different questions at any time during the project. Are we on budget, on schedule? Are we getting the value for each dollar spent? Things like that. We're going to be using what's called earned value management to report our progress. Basically, it's the leading project management process for monitoring projects. It doesn't just tell you how much money you've spent or things like that. It gives you basically a snapshot of where you're at in where you're going, so that way you know if you're really on schedule. Because just managing how much money you've spent doesn't tell you you've got the value for each dollar. And Terry can explain it a lot in more detail on that if you want a more in-depth answer. As Bill Fox mentioned, we do have a experienced project manager and project management team on board. He's a certified project management professional, and he's certified by the Project Management Institute.
Can I ask you a question before you move on? Are these requirements incremental to what the city was planning to spend if we didn't have DOE? Because, in other words, if we had the DOE money require that we spend additional money to implement this program by requiring a PMP, by requiring additional tracking. Have we captured how much that
I would
costs?
think with or without the DOE
do we know what the
would've-
incremental cost is?
We would have needed the additional help due to the complexity of the project. And I don't know.
We actually retained Kima and Terry prior to our getting or even having an understanding of whether we would get DOE funding. We felt early on that we needed a professional manager for this project because it was beyond the scope of what we normally would do here. So we would have done that anyway. What it has done, it has created the need for us to retain Kima, accelerate what they're doing, bolster up somewhat some of their resources in order to make sure that we do comply with what DOE wants. Craig will go through a little bit more, but it does accelerate our overall smart grid process and does require us to do a little bit more than we had planned to do within the first phase and then implement the second phase also. So it did require certain things that we hadn't planned on in a short time period. That's
So it wouldn't be an inhibitor as we move forward that certain requirements we can maybe excel or maybe continue doing even though the requirement is stricter based on DOE guidelines.
correct.
I understand we're going in with an amendment for Kima, and is that going to be for a total of 3 years?
The addition, well, actually, no, it won't be for, it will be till the end of this phase of...
Phase 1?
Yeah.
Okay, so Phase 2 is not included in that
No.
amendment? Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're going to, the DOE build matrix requirements. Basically, the build matrix report the progress of the project according to actual accomplishments, such as number of meters we've installed. We'll report that regularly. It requires a time-phase budget, and a comparison of the build matrix to the time-phase budget will show us how well we're doing. That's the earned value management piece of it. The impact matrix, we're doing all these things. What's the impact on our system? How much energy are customers saving? How much line losses are we reducing? How much more reliable our system is. Those will all be finalized in the impact matrix plan. And the other thing is the project gets accelerated in terms of installation for 3 years, but we have to report for 2 more years to DOA because it's going to be in the last 2 or 3 years that we'll see the impacts. Yeah, reporting, we got to do it monthly for the first 6 months. There will be quarterly reports thereafter. There's, I believe, 4 different agencies we have to report to on a regular basis. And then, like I said, it continues for 2 years beyond the actual project.
Mr. Keenan, what is the penalty, if a lack of a better word, if we don't comply with these certain requirements from the DOE?
We haven't experienced that yet. They're pretty lenient right now. They're understaffed, and we've been meeting all our deadlines. If we were a few days late here or there, I don't see that it's a problem.
But we won't miss.
That's good. Even after 2 years when you complete your project.
We have a report due in 5 days.
Yeah.
If you go to the website, it says you got 5 days, 14 hours, and 22 seconds. They got it down to the... So where are we today? We've signed the $20 million grant agreement. We've submitted our cybersecurity plan. We've submitted our draft project execution plan. We're working on the metrics and benefits plan. We're installing meters this week. We did have 2 customer community events, and I know there was a couple commissioners were there, and we appreciated that. I think they went really well. There's a lot of tough questions, and especially the second meeting. The first one, not so much, but I think it overall went well. We're in the process of we're going to put the meters out, test the backhaul, and test the system, and we're still on schedule for full deployment in late summer, early fall.
Thank you. Go ahead. Questions?
Question, Mr. Keenan. Meter accuracy has been an issue up north with PG&E as well as in Texas. Can you describe, for the benefit of those watching as well as the Commission, what process GWP is going through to ensure that the meters coming in from Itron are meeting the specifications that you require?
All the Itron meters are tested at the factory, but as we replace meters, on the water side, we are going to test pretty much every water meter we take out so we know exactly what the flow rates were. Similarly, with the electric meters we take out, we're going to test those, compare them to the new meters, and do our own in-house testing during the pilot phase.
And are there mechanisms in place that would flag customer accounts if there are major anomalies between the period prior to the new meter?
The computer systems are set up that way, and basically, we're talking 1,000 bills, and hopefully Tammy's people will check every single one of them for the first few months. Yeah, we're beefing up the staffing in that area in order to do so. We don't want to have one bad bill go out, so it's tougher in some areas with water, because of weather and stuff like that. But we'll be taking a look at pretty much every bill that goes out before it goes out to make sure that it's within reason. And then we'll have the backup from our testing of the meters.
Thank you.
What's the schedule again for the smart grid pilot? You've mentioned it before, but I just wanted a reminder on it.
Okay, we're going to be installing meters over the next few weeks, and then we'll be testing the system till we'll have a whole series of tests. Assuming that the tests all pass or if we fix everything that we find, we're looking to start installing the full production late summer, early fall.
And in terms of monitoring and a completion of the pilot, when would the pilot be completed? It's not with the installation, but with the actual monitoring. I imagine that's when the pilot is completed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there'll be if we get the meters all in April, we'll be monitoring the system for a good 2 months, if not more, to make sure we've tested it.
So towards the end of this year, we should be ready for some kind of report on the performance.
We'll be reporting every month.
Yeah.
And we'll give you, whatever details you need to.
I just wanted to know when we'd see reports about actual usage in the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
That would be. Our first bills would probably be coming out in July.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Does the system have an automated method of communicating with the customer if there is, especially as it relates to water usage, if there is a leak or something, if there's an unusual amount of usage or a steady flow of some sort, even through the night? Does the system is smart enough to report back or flag that account?
Yes. It can, what it'll do, it'll monitor or look at the nighttime hours when there shouldn't be no usage, and if there's a certain threshold of usage at any time during those hours, it'll flag the account. And then we're working on system where we could send a message either through the in-home display, should they have one, or calling them up or some other means of notifying them. But it will flag each one that it thinks has a leak.
Okay. And obviously, in the case of water, that's easier to do. But in the case of power, which is more complicated because you may have stuff running at night, is there any kind of a safety mechanism that may flag, very high abnormal usage and communicate with the put that account in place?
That don't we have systems in place for that, Cami?
Yeah, Customer Service Administrator. We do, but right now we only have a read that's every 60 days, and so we have what we work exceptions for high usage. So we will develop reports that we can look at either on a daily or a weekly basis, and we can do some type of comparison. And then within our internal policies, we will find a way to proactively notify customers if there's abnormal usage.
I guess the question is that a manual process, or would that be an automated process?
It's an automated process through reporting. The immediate process would be that we would have to go out and notify the customer. Somewhere down the road, we may be able to use the in-home displays or send other types of messages to those customers.
Sometime down the road for the in-home displays, isn't that in phase 2?
Well,
when will those go in?
During the demonstration phase, we're going to test the technology.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with in-home displays, they range anywhere from $30 to $500. So we want to take a little bit more time in designing and coming up with a program for those. Mm-hmm. And our goal is to have something in place in time for the end of this year. People will have access through other means like the web. But we don't want to go out and commit to a device that's $300 or $400. I mean, that's pretty expensive when you have 70,000 customers.
So when we have full deployment in late summer or early fall, will we have a in-home display picked up by then? No. Is that the answer?
I would not think we would have
Okay.
that. We would have a series of focus groups and customer meetings and talk to customers, see what they're interested in. We talked to a company last week that has designed one that's really inexpensive. It's $30. It can give some information on electric and water. Mm-hmm. So that's something we could look at. And if it's $30, then you're able then to give one to everybody.
Right.
Some people might not want that. They might really want the nicer version. They can do, you can go to Facebook and everything else you want to do on it, but they're $300. So it would be a waste of our money to give them a $30 one they throw in the drawer. So we're going to have looking at a series of programs, maybe for lower income. We give them an economical display that works for them, and then maybe have a rebate or something if somebody wants a higher level of display.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take a little while.
Okay. All right. Appreciate the info.
Regarding the in-home displays, typically the utilities only provide service up until the meter, and obviously it's a different ballgame with the smart meter. Even in the test phase, to what degree is GWP going to provide assistance to customers in the adoption of these in-home displays, setting them up, teaching them how to use it, or any sort of those sorts of support services?
For the small amount we'll have during the demonstration, we can actually have people come out and help them set them up. And I mean, that would be good experience for us to see what kinds of trouble they're having setting them up and see what kind of programs we'll have to do.
One item I just thought of is maybe an interest to apartment building owners is to take this opportunity to install sub-meters. What are the opportunities when we implement this program to do sub-metering so that, let's say, a apartment building has one water meter, but if they want to separate those meters out to individual units, what can an apartment building owner do to maybe utilize this smart meter program? Do we have that capability to separate out those different meters?
This program is not designed to do submarine metering in apartments. And
And it's not designed at this point. So our program right now focuses just on the prime metering. However, at some point in time, it is possible to add that, but it's not part of what we've proposed here. But it will be a possibility for us to take a hard look at that and see what the applications are. As you say, apartments are one application, and how we would handle that. But that would be like another phase from where we are right now.
Okay, yeah, just keep that in mind as we try to implement water conservation measures. The more people understand their own usage, the better. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. Is it GWP's intent to provide a in-home display to every customer that wants it or needs one? Or is it a voluntary kind of process that the customers will pay for themselves? What is the intent of the...
we would certainly like to give one to everyone who wants one, but it's a function of cost.
Most likely, as it stands right now, we will be able to provide one to everyone who wants one. We recognize that not everyone will want one,
Of course.
and so, but that's our proposal for the moment.
And just from a cost-saving perspective, if you are starting a full implementation in later on this year, wouldn't it be less costly to have a in-home display already picked out, so as they're installing these things, they could just, instead of having a second or a third visit, they would be installing this home displays at the same time?
That's a separate technology that would get installed a completely separate way. The installers are just putting in the water meter and the electric meter. The in-home display, it could be, if it's simple enough, you program it so it knows what meter is at that residence, and the homeowner is given a list of instructions on what to do to set it up. Or it could be that we have our in-home audit and energy survey type program where we do, it's a small number, maybe $1,200-1,500 a year, but while they're out there doing the home audit, they could install it. We have other programs for small businesses. We do 300 or 400 of those a year for installations. We could offer a small display as part of that package, so when they're out there changing the lights and doing the energy audit, they could install one of those for the small business. But it doesn't have to be part of the meter installation. That's a separate process. They don't go in the home. It's all outdoors, and it's a completely different thing.
Well, it's an exciting topic, and I'm sure we'll continue our dialogue every month. But we have one request to speak on this item. I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Ronald, please.
Thank you very much, President Yao, members of the GWP Commission, and staff. My name is Herbert Molano. Many of the things that I'm hearing today are very encouraging to me, especially the issue of bringing in, and displaying to the public the status of the project, and having a PMP accessible and managing the project and displaying it. I was going to add that it would be incredibly wonderful educationally for other of the city departments and for the general public to at least see the status of this project as it unfolds month to month. Some may say quarterly would be good, but I think that the additional exposure of basically showing the status of the project and how it is, and how you present the earned value analysis and increase the level of knowledge of the general public so that we can expect that from other projects throughout the city. So GWP is leading the way again, and I really, really like that whole idea. I would like to know if it is possible for us to get an expected cost per single-family residence for the installation of both the smart electric meter and the water meter, and what would the cost be for the multifamily building for the water, and what would be the cost overall, taking into comprising the whole cost of the project, and say per residence is costing us $700 per residence to install this, or $1,000, so that at least we have a gauge that we can use easily and convey that to the public a little bit easier, so that when you got $30 million, it's very difficult to assess a cost that we can basically work with. And I would like to see if we could possibly do that as well. I don't need the commercial information, but it would be nice to have at least for the single family and the dwelling unit in a multifamily apartment building or condo. I want to sort of stress again how important it is for us to look at measures with regard to those individuals who are most in need of having a reduction in the overall cost of the electric utility rate or the electrical utility cost, on a monthly basis if we're going to be billed monthly. And it is my hope that as you meet with the residents and the other stakeholders, that you pay attention especially at the low income and the individuals with difficulty with language. Because I tell you, they have a lot of difficulty even arranging the central air conditioning levers that I have in the building. And I think it would be nice for them to be able to take the benefit, as was seen in Canada, of a 20% reduction in electricity. And I think that really establishing some goals with regard to, we expect these families to reduce their electricity by X number of kilowatts per month would be nice to have as a expected goal other than just the financial ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments? If not, let's move to the next item, please.
The electric reliability report given by Mr. Germond.
President, I'm Richard Germond with the City of Glendale, Principal Electrical Engineer. And it's my pleasure to present the reliability report this month. We had 4 outages during the month of March. The first outage, I didn't bring a picture, sorry about that, but it should be in your report, was a outage on the 10th at about 1:48 in Fremont Feeder number 3. And the outage was caused when a restaurant umbrella was blown by the wind up on top of the primaries. And this caused a outage for 835 people for 44 minutes. The second outage we had was on March 14th at 3:55 p.m., Shoal Feeder number 5. There was an underground cable failure that caused the outage, and the outage affected 262 customers for 125 minutes and 673 customers for 151 minutes. The feeder was put back in stages. So they were able to isolate part of the area and restore some customers, and then once they repaired it, restore the rest. On March 22nd at 9:54, Rosemead Rossmoyne Feeder number 3 relayed due to a field error, affecting 1,079 customers for 2 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes.
With the second one.
Yes.
Maybe it'll be another person answering this question, but let's say after our smart grid is in place, all the smart meters are in, how would that outage be affected, handled, or notified, and what do you think the amount of time would be, the outage time?
When you trip a feeder, you get a breaker at the station. It's known right away. Okay, our dispatch people get a notice right away. Where the smart grid would help is today we have a general area that's affected, and we know this from our maps. Okay, the smart grid will give us a more defined area, so we'll be able to know a little bit more detailed as to exactly which area the people are out and how many people there are out. We have a pretty good estimate today, but it'll be a better estimate.
So instead of like a outage time of 151 minutes, what would be your guess?
The outage time might still be the same. It's going to depend on what type of outage you have, how easy it is to isolate that area before you start to restore customers. Cable failure right now is something that would take the whole system out, and you're looking at a whole system, but in that system there's many components. Mm-hmm. So to find that exact area is the difficulty. That's what takes the time.
Mm-hmm. Or with smart grid, we may even be able to identify the area before something actually happens.
The smart grid goes to the customer. Now, eventually in the future, we'll be putting devices out on the system that'll narrow that area down.
Right. So that's not in our first and second phase. No. It's further down.
Matter of fact, it's not in a phase of the smart grid. The smart grid basically goes to all the customers. Mm-hmm. And so we have identified those customers that are connected to certain transformers. Mm-hmm. And we know the transformers are on a particular feeder.
Right.
So the smart grid will identify exactly what
location
area is out when we have that outage.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
part of the automation we're looking at. Once we start installing more devices such as sectionalizers, we'll be able to actually start isolating a much narrower area as opposed to the full feeder area. That's part of the plan that we're developing. The smart meters themselves will tell us who has outages, but in terms of isolation, the meters themselves will not help. But it's the sectionalizers, additional devices that we'll be installing as part of the smart grid program. So that's down the line.
Down the line, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And then the last outage we had, outage number 4, was on March 22nd at 6 p.m. Western feeder number 4, and it relayed due to unknown causes. And unknown causes, we might get a branch, for instance, that was blown into the primaries and clears itself. So you had an outage, but when you went out and inspected it, you didn't really see a cause. So they go ahead and reinsert, re-energize, and if it
Do we know why let's say number 2, I think it was, why the underground cable failed?
partly age. I would say that was probably the main reason. We have a program where we do inspect these and look at the ages, but there's a lot of things that can happen to cables that are in the ground. And this was a failure from hot leg to ground, so it shorted out because of either bad section of cable or a bad connection or something. But it was an older cable.
And there's a program in place, as you say, to assess the condition of these and to replace them.
Yeah, we're assessing. We are developing records now that will give us information on all the cables so that we can start to assess not only those that are of a certain age, but which ones are the ones that we seem to be having problems. So if we had a particular manufacturer of a cable that we started to notice we had outages, plan for this ahead of time.
Okay, thank you.
Comment, questions? Thank you. Next item, please.
Water conservation report will be given by Raja Takidan.
Good afternoon, President Yao, members of the Commission, and staff. My name is Raja Takidan. I'm a senior engineer with GWP Water. And I have a brief report on the water supply for the month of February. You have a packet in front of you. We continue to see a reduction in the water supply and, of course, the demand, especially the month of February was a wet month. The first time we see the total imports were 46% from Metropolitan Water District, below the 50% level, as compared to the where the local supply was 56% of the total supply. And on the conservation front, we continue to see an improvement where the total savings for this fiscal year were 19% below the 2006 demand level. So that was an improvement. Last month was 18%. This month is an 18% savings. And this we attribute to both the wet weather and also the continued conservation efforts from the community. With that, if you have any questions.
No, thank you. That's an outstanding accomplishment by everyone in the city and staff for being on top of this. Continue to brief the Commission on this. It's very insightful. Any comments or questions? Mr. Miller?
Yes, I believe this question was asked in the last meeting, but it's worth repeating. Do we have a way of measuring conservation effort that, excuse me, is normalized with respect to things like weather and rainfall? And how did we perform in February when that's taken into account?
Well, I don't know if we did that in February. I don't know if we normalized it. Raja, do you?
Well, on the page before the last page, as you can see in the middle graph,
yes,
there the evapotranspiration index, where
yes,
we show that we we continue to be below, which that index shows the temperature and then the humidity. And where the blue line is the water use. That's how we continue to show that.
Right.
Yeah, the savings is due to basically conservation on
Right.
top of the change in humidity of temperature.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
A quick question. What has been, I know GWP has been offering courses or classes for customers to come in and learn about, water conservation, better irrigation, et cetera. What's been the participation level based on what you're seeing?
Ned, are you aware of what the participation level is on that?
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
is it good, bad? Does it seem effective?
Generally, the classes get, I'll call it sold out. We don't charge a fee for it, but they're usually fully subscribed, and we have people, haven't checked recently, but we've had people on the wait list before.
How many rounds of those course classes have you done so far?
I don't recall how many, and I think as the spring is coming on, we're planning another series of them. And people can find out about the schedule by looking at From the Source, which goes out as a mailer.
You intend to do additional community outreach as we approach the hot months where demand can spike?
We do, and I think part of it is we are waiting to see just what the MWD's requirements are so that we could be clear about what's needed. But we do plan to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Good. I had another question here. Congratulations, by the way, on bringing the the NWD purchases below 50%. I don't think I've seen that before. Is that kind of a first? A question, is that sustainable? Do you think we can continue with that?
Well, in my 20-year history with GWP, I've never seen it that low. I mean, this is historic.
Okay. Well, it's a good sign. Let's hope we can continue keeping it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that ends section 4. Next item, please. Jen.
Consideration and discussion of commission protocols regarding oral communications and setting of the agenda and requesting agenda items.
Ms. Godinez.
Commissioner Yao and members of the Commission, at your request, we've agendized 2 procedural issues that we wanted to take up with you. So those 2 issues are time limits for public speakers, as well as the process for setting matters for your agenda. I just want to go through some of the legal parameters that would govern these 2 procedural issues, and then recommend to you that you consider establishing a written policy on these 2 items. And as I speak, I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. So let me start with the time limits for oral communications. As the GWP Commission, you have the absolute discretion to set policies and time limits for public speakers, subject to the limitations of the Brown Act and the First Amendment. Taking the First Amendment first, the First Amendment provides, obviously, the right of free speech to the public. The First Amendment right of free speech is not unlimited in the context of your meetings. You do have some ability to regulate the speech that comes before you. For example, certainly if someone were to come and speak on a topic that's not within your jurisdiction or that is unduly repetitive or irrelevant, you have the opportunity to limit that speech, even though that would be a content-based regulation of speech. Likewise, you can certainly regulate speech that is considered fighting words or likely to incite violence. Anything of that nature that is an immediate disruption of your meeting, of course, you have the authority to regulate that as well. You cannot do any viewpoint-based regulation of speech. So just because you don't like what someone has to say, or you disagree with their viewpoint, or they're being critical of you or the city or policies, that's not a basis upon which you're entitled to restrict speech or regulate speech. Similarly, under the Brown Act, like the First Amendment, the Brown Act gives the public the right to address you on any matter that's within your subject matter jurisdiction, as well as more on specific agenda topics at or during the time of discussion of those items. Under the Brown Act, there's no minimum or maximum amount of time that's provided for speaking. you do need to give the public a meaningful opportunity for input. I've done a quick review of what other boards and commissions and the City Council do, just to give you sort of instruction on what others are doing to guide what your decision might be. The most common time limit is 5 minutes. There are approximately 10 boards and commissions that have a 5-minute time limit. There are about 5 that have a 3-minute time limit. And there are a handful that have no specific time limit, and they leave it to the discretion of the chair. And I should point out that if you choose not to establish a specific time period today, it's within your discretion as the chair, as the presiding officer, to set the time limit. So you could do that at the outset of the meeting or before oral communications. You could certainly, obviously based on a viewpoint neutral situation, you could establish a time limit if, for example, there's limited time available in the room, something of that nature. The Brown Act also has restrictions on the discussion that you can have during oral communication. So, for example, if a member of the public provides comments on an issue that's within your jurisdiction, you do not have the right during oral communications to engage in discussion and debate on that item. During oral communications, by its nature, those items are not items that are on the agenda. So during oral communications, they can only speak on items that are not agendized. So for that reason, because it hasn't been set on the agenda, you can't deliberate, you can't discuss, you can't take action. You do have the right to ask a follow-up question of staff or to comment briefly to the speaker, but it cannot be a lengthy discussion or any action taken on the item. As I said, you either have the discretion to set a specific time limit that you want to adopt as a written policy, or you can decide at the outset of the meeting. And certainly you could also adopt the hybrid policy that the City Council has, where it's a 5-minute time limit, and then for speakers that are willing to limit their comments to 3 minutes, they're given priority in the agenda and they can present their comments or announcements early on in the meeting. So that's another option that's available to you. You do have a lot of discretion as long as you abide by the Brown Act and by the First Amendment and provide that right of speech to the public. As part of your speaker policy, I'd like to have you consider adopting the policy of council or your own policy related to electronic presentations made by members of the public. The council has a very specific policy which I've provided to you for your review. Essentially, those electronic presentations, PowerPoints if you will, need to be provided in advance. I believe it's 48 hours in advance. And just so you know, those are not screened for content, but they are screened to make sure that there are no viruses or anything of that nature. And members of the public that wish to present PowerPoints need to sign an agreement where they're going to indemnify the city, defend the city in the event that there's a claim of anything from defamation to infringement of copyright or anything of that nature. But that's the policy of council that you can consider incorporating into yours if you choose. So that's my presentation on the time limits. Before I move on to the setting of the agenda, I'd like to ask if there are any questions on this topic.
You have some clarifying questions. So, are we limited to setting different speaker limits for agenda items versus oral communication items? Can we still follow that path? Like, say, having 3 minutes for agenda item versus 5 minutes for oral communication items. Is that still allowable?
Absolutely, and in fact, you could even have different time limits for different items on your agenda. For example, if you have a large number of speakers on an item, you could restrict the time to a shorter time frame. If you have something that's like an appeal, you would want to, in your policy, you definitely want to set that aside as a different category so that you provide legally mandated time limits for speaking. But you don't have to have the same time limit for oral communications as agenda items.
I'd like to maybe hear some discussion on what.
I have a question of those members of the commission who have longer tenure on this commission. Have we ever had a situation where we've had so many speakers that we've had to limit the time for them?
I haven't experienced that, and I was going to make the general comment. I think we have some liberality here. I don't think we have a lot of speakers generally, and I've never seen a situation during my time here where we were overloaded with so many speakers that it created a little bit of disorder.
But and the only time we've faced that, I think the maximum number of speakers we had was 4 to 5. But the only time we faced a restriction was the time constraint when there's not a meeting
Right after.
right after us.
Excellent point. Yeah, that's the only time we actually have had a problem. It's when there was somebody meeting and, at 6 o'clock and we had to be out of here. It's already 6:03. So, but on the other hand, if we meet in a place like this where I don't think there's as much demand, maybe we would be free of that. So.
I guess a question for Ms. Godinez. Do you have any recommendations or counsel regarding, since there isn't this, it seems like it's a solution looking for a problem in some respect, but from a legal perspective, is it better to have something in place versus not, even though doesn't seem to be an issue from a speaker time limit perspective at least?
I think it's always a good idea to have a written policy just so there's not a misunderstanding. In terms of what specific time limit you choose, I don't have a recommendation, other than make sure that you give at least a minimal time period to public speakers. I don't think I would go below 2 minutes, for example. And certainly you can give as much or more time if you'd like, with the idea in mind that you obviously want to have efficiently run meetings, but you want to give members of the public an opportunity to give input. I should point out, if I haven't already, even if you've got that written policy, the chair always has the discretion to adjust that as long as it's based on viewpoint neutral situations. Before you make a decision on this item, if there are no further questions, let me give you my brief presentation on the other item, and then there's a motion with some decision points for you to discuss and review. So on the setting of agendas for GWP meetings, we talked about this at the January meeting just briefly. We talked about the preference of GWP staff to have at least 2 commissioners express interest in an item before it's placed on the agenda. That is the policy that City Council adopts. It's certainly not required of you that you follow that policy. However, staff had requested that just so that they would ensure that there's at least more than just an individual interest in an item before it be placed on the agenda. Now, I should also point out that you don't need to do a formal motion in order to decide whether or not to place items on the agenda. This commission has sort of gone both ways, and just as we're discussing it, just know that it doesn't need to be a formal motion. It could be as simple as, under our agenda forecast, one member expressing an interest and a second member saying, yes, I agree. The way the council does it is not by formal motion, but again, when they're discussing the item, one member will say, I'd really like to have a presentation on X, and then, someone else needs to chime in. If there's, dead silence after they express an interest, it would not be placed on the agenda. It does need to be 2 affirmative members saying that they would like to consider that item. As we discussed with regard to the oral communications, under the Brown Act, when you're discussing these items on the agenda forecast, because they're not agendized, you can't get into a discussion on the merits of the item. It would simply be, yes, I think we should have this item, or no. It's not, because X, Y, and Z, and I think this way and I think that way. It really has to be just limited to whether or not it goes on the agenda. I would like to point out that there are alternative models. In the city of Burbank, for example, the city council has what they call the one-step, two-step process, and somewhat cumbersome. They have 2 meetings on any given agenda item. The first to decide whether or not to agendize it, and staff will work up a whole report and say, gee, it would take us 10 hours to put together a report, and here are some of the issues you might want to consider. And the second discussion, if they decide to proceed, is the actual substantive discussion of the item. So that's another model. There are certainly others, but I just present for your consideration those options, and if there are no further questions, then that's the conclusion of my presentation.
One clarification. There's one request to speak on this item. Should we hear the public comments first before we do a general discussion among the commissioners?
You certainly can do that. At any rate, you have to have any speakers that wish to speak on any item have to be heard before or during your deliberations on the item. So you certainly should not take it after you entertain the motion. But other than that, it's up to your discretion.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to request the speaker speak before we deliberate on this motion. I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Molano, please.
Thank you very much. President Yao, members of the Commission, and staff, my name is Herbert Molano. The issue of oral communications has been an issue of some contention in the past, and not so much because the public has abused the process, but rather the other way, that the staff has used or members of the Commission have used the process to basically stifle and make it more difficult for the public to speak. I think that we should have a process by which we encourage the public to come before you, that they feel welcome to come in and express their concerns. And when you don't have speakers coming before you, you have to question whether or not you're doing sufficient effort to really encourage public participation. At the end of the day, that's what a democracy is about. And so I would say that if you're going to err in any which way, that you err on behalf of the public. You know, when someone comes in to speak about an agenda item, the usual tradition is you speak for 3 minutes. But oftentimes I find the frustration that, not in this case, but in other commissions, that nobody exchanges any ideas with the speaker, thinking that the rules of the oral comments are applying to the agenda items. Sometimes I think it's backwards. Precisely it's on the agenda item that you should be speaking more, because that's the item that is upon which you're deciding. So if you're going to make any changes, I would suggest you make it more towards being a little bit more flexible with the time given for the agenda item. The issue with regard to why this Brown Act rules have been put in place, especially with the part of discussion, it's been, and I've been reading this law for a long time, and I was about to file a lawsuit against the city because of the abuses that I've experienced. You know, where on a city council meeting, the mayor gave 3 minutes to everyone, but when I came in, he gave me 2. In other words, the law was not applied, or the rules were not applied equally to everyone. He finally relented and didn't apologize, but at least made allowances for that. The issue that I have is that when someone speaks about an oral comment, it is not that you cannot speak at all, because I may be asking some general information. Last week something was presented. I would like to see if it could be clarified, and I don't think that would impact on any future decisions. The law is there so that you don't deliberate on something that is substantive that will lead to a decision that will impact the policies. But if I'm asking for the names or your email addresses and so forth, or a clarification of what occurred before, and you're not making policy, I don't think there's going to be any problem. I don't think the city has ever been sued for you providing more information that, and have an interchange. So don't be afraid of an interchange, even though the city attorney continually are basically out there trying to say, no, you can't do that. If you're not making policy and the decisions are not relevant to any future policies, I don't see why you cannot have an exchange with the speaker. Another item, once I've give an electronic presentation and sign the document for the year, usually people know that the information that I bring up on a PowerPoint is information that I've researched and usually based on the data that the city itself has provided. So sometimes the 48-hour limitation to the notification, I find it a bit cumbersome. I think that you can pretty much do a quick view and see that the data that is being presented is fairly innocuous, if uncomfortable sometimes. Let's see. And the idea of having 2 affirmatives to provide an agenda item, very rarely do we find commissioners placing items on the agenda here at this commission. My suggestion is that don't buy by it. If there's a commissioner who's in his good judgment feels that an item should be in the agenda, that should be sufficient for the chair or the president to basically put it on the agenda and request it. Thank you very much.
If I may briefly respond to 2 of the comments that were made. First, with regard to what the parameters are of your response during oral communications. Under the Brown Act, it limits any response to briefly questioning the speaker or briefly asking follow-up of staff. The word briefly comes straight out of the Brown Act. So that would be the guidelines that we would ask that you abide by. And the second issue is the speaker reminded me about the electronic presentation policy. I was actually going to suggest the opposite, which is that 48 hours, I suppose if we're talking about 48 business hours, and I should say that the city council policy does not so indicate, that more time would be better than less time, because it does need to go to the city's information officer for processing. So, 48 hours for a Monday meeting probably wouldn't cut it. So just something to keep in mind.
Well, just to clarify that presentation point, what if it's not projected, but given to the commission? Would that be acceptable within the 48-hour period?
I guess, the city council policy doesn't really address that. Certainly, if you were just to have a policy that was presented to you, I don't see any issue with that, really. That wouldn't fall within the policy, so that should be okay.
So anyone in the public can hand us material if they fail to meet the 48-hour deadline.
I would think so, yes. The policy was really just meant to address computerized PowerPoint-type presentations.
Comments? Questions? Also, should we have two motions because the two items you spoke of, or is it just one motion regarding the time constraint or the agendized affirmative?
As it's agendized, it's one motion with two subparts, and there's sort of some blanks for you to fill in if you look at your agenda packet at the draft motion, which is towards the back, this particular item, and I do have extra copies if you need them.
Last 2 pages.
And this motion is a direction for you all to move to direct staff to put together a written policy. Because there are so many elements to it, we really wanted to get your feedback before writing up an actual policy. And based on your direction, we would write up the policy and then bring it back to you for your consideration and approval.
Well, I like having a standard so that we know that when the speaker comes in, that he or she knows that they have 5 minutes to speak or 3 minutes to speak. And then at our discretion, at least the chair's discretion, that we can restrict that limit if we have a time constraint, or maybe expand on that if we have additional items we want to hear. So I am in favor of having something in writing, as a standard to follow, and then we can deviate based on the chair's comments.
Because we have so few speakers, and I think we have a certain liberality of time, I wanted to suggest that the idea of not having a time limit, unless specified at the beginning of the meeting, if we sense there's a lot of people present, what the rest of you would think of that.
Well, I'd rather have something in our agenda and then deviate from that point so that people coming in knowing that they have 5 minutes, and then at the beginning of the meeting, if there's a time constraint, we can make that announcement.
Okay. May I suggest a longer time limit of 7 minutes?
In regards to oral communications or agenda items?
Either, both, actually.
What we've been having has been 3 minutes, right? For most of the time, it's been 3 minutes for oral and agendized, right?
So far, I think we've done 5 minutes.
So far, that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 5. Okay,
yeah.
so I thought it was 5.
It's been 5?
Is it 5 or 3?
Or 3?
What have you been
I
studying?
thought it's been 3.
I think it's been 3, but over time, it's probably varied between those two.
I think it's been between 3 and, 3 for, most of the time it's been 3 and at times 5. Right. I moved to have 3 for oral and then 5 for agendized. And then, at the discretion of the chair, then you can change that.
A comment is when, a year or two ago when I was in your spot, I recall that we were using 5 minutes, and I don't recall that it was ever reduced from that. So it's news to me if it's 3, but I don't know how that was determined.
Yeah, I just recall from the February meeting that it went down to 3. I mean, I recall as well a few years ago that we used to have 5.
I heard several times it's been 3. I think Mr. Milano indicated himself, too, that's been 3.
Okay.
Why not just keep it consistent rather than, like I said, we don't have a problem today, so why not just make it a standard of 5 for both, and that way people know.
I can live with that. It's not that big of a deal, so. I saw long faces when I suggested 7, so I'll go for 5 in the interest of avoiding debate on it.
Okay. I think 3, from what we've seen over the past few months, definitely is limiting. So, anything, less than 5 probably just has not worked over the past few months. So, getting it to 5 for both agenda items, specifically for agenda items, because we're discussing it, we should spend more time on it versus oral communications. Absolutely. I'm okay with 5 on both.
Yeah.
So,
if I may just sort of assist with the process of getting us to a motion, it sounds like there's somewhat of a consensus for 5, but I would suggest we walk through the elements of the motion, and then someone can make a formal motion in a second.
Yeah, there was a motion mentioned, but I think maybe Commissioner Chan can retract that motion first, because she did
I did, but yeah, let's
Hold off on a
Discard
motion.
that.
yeah,
discard
yeah,
the
we'll
motion.
just
There's no second.
yeah, discard that and make another motion.
Okay. So the first item, it says oral communications and public speaking. A, oral communications time limit of blank minutes per speaker. B, time limits per speaker on agendized items to be blank minutes. So I think we've talked about those two. The third is 1C. The president or presiding officer will retain the discretion to adjust time limits for either oral communications, public speaking, or both based on viewpoint neutral criteria, as discussed. And then D, the policy, and there's a blank for shall or shall not incorporate the City Council's policy regarding electronic presentations. That would be the next item for your discussion.
So for the electronic policy, well, I'm in favor of having 40 hours notice or more because of the staff's consideration.
May I suggest 2 business days instead of 48 hours because of the conflict that council pointed out. For a Monday meeting, 48 hours is misleading.
48 business hours.
Okay.
Yeah, 48 business hours is better.
So that'll be more than 2 days.
Yeah. You do 48 business hours.
Oh, wait,
a week.
that's correct. You're right, sorry. 48 business hours won't do it.
2 business
Yeah.
days.
2 business days.
2 business days.
2 full
Yes,
business days.
Yes.
Yeah, 2 full business days. All right.
Okay.
So I think we're consensus with 2 business days.
And then there's an option in your motion if there are any other considerations you want to add to the speaker policy with respect to time limits or otherwise that come to mind. We can certainly fold those into the policy when we write it up.
Okay, I think we have software. We have item 1.
Okay, so hearing none, your next decision point is on the setting of the agenda. A says at least blank commissioners must express interest in placing a matter on the agenda before it will be added to the agenda. That's one option. B is the Burbank City Council process that I had described, the 1-step, 2-step option. C is a blank for you to fill in another process of your choosing. And then D just says that the commission will retain its rights to call special meetings consistent with California law and the Glendale Municipal Code.
So just as a question, so D is an option, as in other words, it would be 2. D would be would cover it as a blanket. Is that what that D is, or?
D is something I'd recommend that you include regardless.
Okay,
Essentially,
that's
under the Muni Code and under state law, you can set a special meeting. Either the chair or any 3 commissioners can call a special meeting at any time. So by setting this policy, all that means is you're not giving that up.
So basically, we would choose out of A, B, or C plus.
And then,
Well, I'd like to get maybe General Steiger's comment on B. I mean, how feasible is that to implement when you have a 1 or 2-step process? Would that be more cumbersome for you and staff, or is it something that you would prefer?
The 2-step process would be more difficult.
I would be in favor of streamlined.
Yeah, I wouldn't want. That's why I didn't want B in the first place, but I just want to get some feedback.
And
from
my recommendation, for what it's worth, on 2A is that we just have that as 1. I mean, I don't know that, City Council, I understand, because there's more contentious issues that come up there, but again, at least based on my limited experience, perhaps colleagues have more experience in this area.
We're a fairly agreeable lot. I think if somebody brings something up, surely someone else will consent. And I think maybe the advantage of having 2 is we don't know what future commissions will be like, and there could be commissions where there's one person who's kind of dominant or a little bit out of line, kind of forcing an agenda that's a little bit counter to interest, and having someone else chime in to support that would be maybe advisable. So I would support the current policy of 2.
And it's also the option of the chair, rather than having 2 commissioners.
Right.
Always let me know. Yeah, I would agree to that policy as well as to adopt a future policy in place so that, like Commissioner Miller mentioned, we don't want future commissioner who maybe hog the agendized item for future meetings.
I'm agreeable with that.
2
Okay.
could be.
All right. Okay.
I think 2 is minimal enough. And as far as item B is concerned, I think if an item is important enough, we should just, have it agendized, whether it's cost too much for anybody to prepare the information should not be a factor if an item is important enough to be agendized.
I didn't think the current policy is two. We've been
for the past few months. Did we discuss that?
Been,
it has been two.
It has been two.
Within like the last year and a half, at times. Okay, I was not in the last meeting. I recall there were times when one commissioner was interested. Then the topic got agendized, and yes, so far it has not been an issue because everyone was able to bring up significant issues and issues of importance. So no, we have not had any issues. I'm open with two. I just wanted to kind of clarify. I thought I've seen it before where one commissioner was able to get it agendized.
You're correct, and I think several meetings ago it was stipulated to be two. I think earlier this year, actually, or maybe last December or so.
Okay.
Maybe
it was early this year.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So shall we say 2 for 2A?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And D is retained.
D is-
So B and C are struck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we're ready for someone to make a motion.
I have
Go ahead.
actually a comment going back to 1E. We talked about non-electronic forms of presentation. Should we discuss that very briefly if you want to have the 2 business day rule apply to non-electronic forms as well?
Well, I think Commissioner Yao's suggestion that we allow non-electronic material to be reviewed in a quicker period just for content to make sure nothing's really, make sure it's relevant and nothing that's going to cause a riot. That would be.
So would that
I
be
think that's
covered in
prudent.
1E? Would that be a 1E?
Yeah, I think so, because some people may have an urgent issue that may pop up at the last minute, and they'd like to present material, and they might be able to do so with handouts, hard copies, and we should, I think, make allowance for that.
I'm not sure what the concern is with the written materials. Honestly, I'm a little concerned from a First Amendment standpoint if we start restricting, materials that folks can provide to you at a meeting, unless there's a real concern. Maybe we can talk specifically about what it might be. But with the electronic media, I think it's in part, bugs and viruses that might get onto our computers or breaking our computers, or, because it's being broadcast, there could be a defamation issue or something along those lines. But with the written material, I don't see that as an issue.
Yeah, I don't think Commissioner Ajemian was mentioning that we want to be more open to receiving material, non-electronic material at a commission meeting, even the last minute.
I think you just want to specify.
Right. And also, you can have defamation issues with written.
No question. But I guess just to clarify then, what you're requesting is just something within the policy that clarifies the public right to submit written
Correct.
materials? Okay.
That there'll be no time constraint on written?
I'm okay with that, right. What about the issue of defamation, though? Is that something that, would the council want to look at it beforehand or something, or do we just let that pass, or?
They're just providing the materials to you. They're not distributing them to the public. I suppose we could have them sign that same sort of waiver if that's a concern, but
I'm all right with it.
why don't we just say that, the public will have the right to submit written materials, and I'll review it for, making sure that it meets the legal criteria, but I don't see a huge issue with that.
Okay, are there any further discussions or deliberations on this motion? Is there a motion then? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the new policy and oral communication for a time limit of 5 minutes per speaker, and for agendized items to be 5 minutes per speaker, to have 2 full business days, review of electronic material and written material to be allowed within that time frame, and to have at least 2 commissioners express interest in placing a matter on the agenda with retention of item D here, that the commission will retain its rights to call special meetings consistent with law. Hope I didn't give too much there.
think I got it.
Do I have a
I
second?
add to that motion to give the chair the discretion to add, subtract, change, or
C.
modify. Basically, 1C, the amount of time allowed for all communications.
And I'll second your amended version.
Maybe a point of clarification, is that an automatic? Does that need to be part of this motion, or is that already part of the municipality code, that the chair always had that discretion?
The chair always has that discretion as the presiding officer to make that change. But regardless, we can incorporate that formally into your policy.
Right. Is it already in 1C?
Yeah. Okay. So what was the, I'm confused again, what was the amendment to the motion?
Not amendment. And from what I understood,
Adding on.
He was just adding
on
this
1C
one.
to
Oh, okay.
Adding your
Commissioner Miller's
Okay.
motion. Yeah. And I second Commissioner Miller's motion of what he made.
And did we include all material handed in to be reviewed by legal? And there's no time?
Oh, I don't know if that was
Stipulated.
well, I don't know if that was my understanding of what was intended. What I was thinking is that I will make sure that this policy, as we write it up with respect to any written communications, that we're consistent with First Amendment, Brown Act, and everything, but that written materials would not be subject to that 2-day.
No, that's right. And at time of submittal, you will review it for the defamation aspect of it, right?
Legal.
Legal.
We can. If that's what this commission desires, we can certainly do that.
But then you're kind of imposing a time limit
Yeah.
without saying a time limit, because you have to obviously allow for time for legal to review if you do that.
I would assume that the materials handed in, like before, the speaker is called to the podium. So at that time, I thought maybe legal could quickly take a look at it. But if the rest of the commissioners don't think it's necessary, I'm okay with it.
The way it works, for example, for the PowerPoints, is that we don't review it for content, but the person signs a document indicating that, you know, they recognize that they'll take full responsibility if there's anything defamatory in there, or if there's anything in there that could cause the city a legal problem, that they take full responsibility for that. So it would seem that it'd be fine to extend that same policy for the written materials. I think that'd be an easier approach than, us reviewing for content. I get somewhat uncomfortable.
Extend that policy. Are you suggesting that they sign something? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Well, what about when they enter and fill out this card? Couldn't it be something in the back saying that once they fill out a card to speak, that's waiving, that is signing off their policy for distributing material as well, so that they don't have to sign a separate waiver for it?
Let me give that some thought. Potentially, I do want to make sure that it's a knowing waiver. It's not just some boilerplate on the back of a form, and that there's some thought given to that. So, let me give that some consideration. What I could suggest is that I could write something up as part of your policy next time and present it to you, something that will meet the legal requirements that you can review. If you don't like it, we can strike it from the resolution that you adopt next time with your policy. We could bring something back. Or if you like it, we can just go ahead and incorporate it. But I do want to give some thought to how we do this, because obviously the right of speech is so important.
And I would be in favor of making it as easy as possible so that we're not creating procedural barriers for people to participate in public dialogue.
Agreed. Okay.
So since there's a motion in front and I think a second, shouldn't we vote on this now, or maybe have you write up the formal motion so we get clarification and then have it in front of all the commissions so that we're all on the same page? Because I know someone has to take notes, and I know we have like 5 minutes here. That's self-explanatory. But should that be proper to maybe have a full motion that is final in front of us before we approve the motion? Or should we approve a motion now and move forward?
I think we should move forward. I think we should approve it, but I think that, there's a little bit of uncertainty as what motion is pending right now, because there have been so many amendments. So if I may suggest, if we could, if the motions that are pending could be rescinded, and we could move on a motion that's clean with all of these elements incorporated into it, a motion in a second. I can read to you what I understand to be, the desires that have been expressed, and then if someone wants to move in second, we can move forward. that sound acceptable?
That's up to me. Should the original
I'm fine with that.
person who moved?
I'll rescind the motion that I made in favor of one which I understand you'll be reading to us.
Okay, well, let me give it a shot, okay? Moved by the commissioners that the staff will prepare and present for the GWP Commission's approval a GWP Commission policy regarding oral communications and public speaking, and to the process for setting the agenda for future GWP Commission meetings. The policy will include the following elements. 1, oral communications and public speaking. Oral communications time limit of 5 minutes per speaker, and time limits for speakers on agendized items to be 5 minutes per speaker, except in the case of a hearing where the time limits shall be established by the President based on legal requirements. C, the presiding officer or the President at the meeting will retain the discretion to adjust time limits for oral communications, public speaking on agenda items, or both, based upon one or more of the following viewpoint-neutral criteria: number of speakers, number, length, or complexity of items on the agenda, limited time scheduled for the meeting or meeting room. And the policy shall incorporate the City Council's policy regarding electronic presentations, except that the policy shall provide for 2 full business days for presentation of electronic media for presentation by the public. And finally, the policy will incorporate procedures regarding public submission of written comments, which shall be reviewed by the city attorney and presented to the commission at the next commission meeting for approval. 2, the process for setting the agenda for future GWP commission meetings. At least 2 commissioners must express interest in placing a matter on the agenda before it will be added to the agenda, and the commission will retain its rights to call special meetings consistent with California law and the Glendale Municipal Code. So that is the motion as I understand it. Is that...
That's the last item in 1E, I think. That was the item in question of legal review for written handouts.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're trying to avoid that process if possible.
Yeah, let me suggest we do avoid that. The reason being that in one case here, early when I was here, I think I was the only person on the board currently here who was there. There was an issue about fluoridation of water that came up, and some people attended a meeting with very little advance notice. They had some written materials that they distributed, and it would have been cumbersome, I think, for them if we had them present it to the attorney first for review and then wait another month before hearing it. I don't think we're encumbering much liability by avoiding the legal review, and instead what we're gaining is a culture which allows more spontaneous public expression, which I think is more consistent with the kind of interaction with the public that we would want.
And I also don't like the optics of everything from a free speech perspective being run by a lawyer. No offense to Ms. Godinez or any other lawyer.
So perhaps then what your motion could say is that the written comments would be exempt from the policy with respect to electronic communications. And I can tell you that the council policy doesn't cover written materials at all. It's just not even part of their policy. So I would suggest that you just adopt the council policy for the electronic
We can
stuff.
just leave that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is
Is
that
that
okay to
yeah.
leave it out?
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Just adopt the council policy
Yeah.
for electronic version.
Right.
Okay. So with that stricken,
I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution as read to us by council.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Armenian. And should we take a voice vote or just vote individually?
it's up to you.
Yeah, I think we have consensus. Let's take a voice vote all in favor of the motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Unanimous, passed. Motion carries. Let's see. So we have a next item.
Oral communications.
We have one request called to speak. I'd like to invite Mr. Herbert Milano, please.
President Yao, members of the GWP Commission, and staff, my name is Herbert Molano. I am here to encourage you to give us a proper evaluation of the electrical rates, comparative rate, City of Glendale and nearby communities, in a way that is concise and consistent and easily available from other cities. I've undertaken this little project myself by basically using from their reports. For example, the City of Glendale has the comprehensive annual financial report, and in the statistical section, you can find two numbers: total kilowatt hours sold and total revenues. And from there, we can determine very easily what is the overall for the citywide average cost. The reason why it's become so interesting to me is because I've decided to take my own electric bills, go back 3 years, added up all the kilowatt hours of usage, added all my electrical portion of the cost, and I'm paying, on average, between 21 cents and 22 cents per kilowatt hour. Yet, that's a very delicate issue for a lot of people here in Glendale, apparently, because it appears that they don't want to accept the fact that I'm really paying that rate. They come back with some other issues, how much I pay for trash, how much I pay for water, and so forth, compared. In a very clean and straightforward way, you go to city and figure out, for residential usage, total kilowatt hours sold, total revenues, out of that usage, as a very strict comparison to figure out how much it is that we're actually paying. On a similar way, I would like to see the same information being provided to the customer in a clear manner as well. I had one of my tenants call me a couple of weeks ago, incredibly happy, saying, Mr. Milano, I can't believe it. This is my lowest electric bill I've had ever. And I'm thinking, I don't remember a rate change. And their usage of electricity is usually around 10 kilowatt hours per day. So I went to her apartment, take a look, and I noticed it was 54 days. Then I decided to check. We have a range on the billing from 54 days or less to sometimes 69 days. Basically, I put a 25% variance with regard to the actual billing cycle, which makes the comparison on the graph, by dollar amounts, absolutely meaningless. It has no meaning whatsoever. The only thing that is meaningful is if you have a consistent measure, such as here's your cost per kilowatt hour, or here's your average cost per day, like the city of Los Angeles does. It tells you it costs you $1.30 per day to run your electricity. Very concise. I think that we're putting information in that is absolutely useless, because we cannot even tell what it is, and you can ask anyone receiving a bill to see what happens to be the base rate, or what is the adjustable rate, or the customer. I think it's convoluted. And if you think about it even further, if you really think about it, the way we're being charged to say we're going to charge you per meter X amount, and then we're going to charge you for let's say the water use. At the end of the day, that meter's been paid long ago. Why not just simply say straight out, if you're a multi-family building and you got a 2-inch line, whatever, this is your rate. But I don't even think that even the 2-inch line actually matters. So if it's a 1.5-inch line, it shouldn't be any relevance, because what we're controlling is the amount of water used. So I don't see why we're making this thing so incredibly complex for everyone. It should be as simple as possible. So next month, I'd like to bring a PowerPoint with a suggested bill that sort of takes on these elements to make it easier for a family to become more knowledgeable with regard to their costs. If someone knows that let's say they're spending $2 a day for electricity, and they get a device with the smart meters that say this is how much you're spending, that's an easy way for an individual to say I'm using too much, or or I'm conserving as I intended to do. Let's see the clear. Oh yes, and I would like to see a really large and clear place, where the customer can see how much it is that is really costing on a real consistent measure. I know I mentioned this thing earlier, but I just want it large enough so that we can really do comparisons on a frequent basis. Let's see. That is it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Can we defer the question to staff?
Well, yeah, we've had this discussion numerous times, both on the rates and on the bill, and we have actually made changes to the bill. But at this point, since we are going to smart grid, it will be part of the instantaneous readout, so customers will be able to look at it from any way they'd like. per day, per hour, per week. So there'll be lots of different ways of doing that. We have changed the bill over the last couple of years a couple of times, both to reflect how we do measure water and electric. So at this point, I think it would be kind of a measure that would be not cost beneficial given where we're going in smart grid, because we'll be there very, very shortly. As far as the rates are concerned, we've given rate presentations a number of times here. We gave one 2 months ago, which I thought was fairly complete. We can, as Mr. Milano very well knows, we can compare rates and get lots of different comparisons. And Mr. Milano may have his way of doing it. Whether it shows that we're 20 cents per kilowatt hour, I don't know. I do know what our rates are. And I do know that if we take all of the dollars in and divide it by kilowatt hours, it's not accurate, because the dollars in also represent other dollars that come in that are not related necessarily to kilowatt hour sales. So that's not an accurate way of doing it. We've tried to take the typical customer, and that's what we did 2 months ago, and present that to you and to city management also, to show what a typical customer, a typical GWP customer would use in a given month or 2 month period, and what that would cost versus our surrounding towns, municipals, and investor-owned utilities. And we've done that. We can continue to do that if you'd like. It's a constant updating of where we are. The City of Los Angeles does do that for us every month, by the way. And I don't know if you get a copy of that, where our rates are, again, typical rates for residential business at 2 levels are compared for primarily the SCAPA utilities and Edison. So we do have that comparison that City of Los Angeles does for us. So we could do that. We could provide that. But this is not. We've heard this from Mr. Milano numerous times. So I guess the question. I'll bring the question back to you. What would you like us to do?
Quick question about, we talked about, I mean, obviously the smart coming up, that's definitely an important factor. So when do you think people will have the devices or the ability to get the kind of measures that was being presented?
Of course, the demonstration will have that by June of this year. The entire city will have that by, I believe it's October of next year, of 2011. They'll have that ability. So we could, between now and 16 months from now, 17 months from now, go through an exercise to change the billing. But at that point, once we reach that point, we will have done all this work for essentially very little returns. Yeah. So that's when it will be available, both through the in-house unit that we put in, whatever we decide to do in terms of the type, and through the internet. And every customer at any time will always have, once a customer is connected to Smart Grid, they'll have the ability to go on the internet and see the various comparisons with where they've been the day before and the month before and so on. So it is something that will be available. And again, so if we need to change the billing in the next, say, 16 months, we could probably do that. And that's why I'll leave it up to you.
I think Mr. Steiger has responded to the question. I would direct the Commission to consider, limiting discussion on this issue as we are under oral communications.
Right. Yeah, let's move on to, if you have any additional suggestions, you can do that under new business, as to suggest what staff should do to respond to this. So let's move on. There's no more oral communication, so let's move on to the next item, please.
Old business?
Any old business that we can remember? If not, let's move on to next item.
New business.
A new business. I have one item, as you suggested, Mr. Steiger, is to present that LA DWP rate comparison, because I think I personally haven't seen it. I mean, I've seen the comparison that GWP staff has done. So maybe, do you think it will be available next month's meeting?
Oh, yeah. We can provide that. We'll provide it to you right with tomorrow. We can. Okay. It comes out monthly.
Oh, monthly, okay.
Yes.
So that'll be a good comparison for
And
future ones.
I've seen it. It's in different categories
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Yeah, so you'll be presenting,
Okay.
residential business and all that.
I believe you showed it here a couple of months ago, right?
I don't know if we did a piece of it. That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, we did a piece of
You
it.
compared GWP's rate with LA DWP and other
In
municipalities.
Burbank, Pasadena, Riverside, yes.
But that was,
Edison.
that was based from the GWP's perspective, though, right? Not.
No. Oh, what we did, you mean?
Yeah, what
Well,
you.
we used the same comparison numbers, so we didn't change any numbers. I mean, it's the same comparison. The only difference with what we get from Los Angeles every month is it's numerous categories, and it's more utilities. But essentially, we haven't changed anything. Same comparison.
Do you think it will be the same numbers as what staff presented a few months ago?
What we did is we took one snapshot of that for the typical GWP customer, so because that's what was relevant to GWP. So it'll look a little different than that, but it'll still have that comparison, so you can see where we fit right with everyone else.
Okay, it'll be good timing to maybe bring that discussion up again next month, as
Sure.
I think Mr. Bolano mentioned that he'll be coming up with his comparison
Sure.
of what typical customer would be paying.
If I may suggest, since we'll be getting smart grid updates on a monthly basis, it might be good to devote one of those to providing further detail on exactly how customers will be able to take a look at their data so that we can have more of an eye towards the future, because I would hate to spin our wheels for a short period of time if we know that there's a more robust solution on its way.
We'll do that.
And I think in order to have that discussion, that perspective, it would be good to actually spend some time on what will the customer see, what will the customer be able to do once the system's in place.
Right. We'll do that.
Well, then early on, Glenn, you indicated that you will be providing a more detailed strategic plan update.
That will be next month.
So that will be
Yes.
May.
Yes.
So I guess any more new business before we move to agenda forecast? Any more? Okay, the next item. please.
Agenda forecast?
So for agenda forecast, I think Commissioner Chan mentioned that we'll be hearing the strategic plan update next month, as well as this GWP organizational chart. That's been on there for a while and it's been pushing back. Is that something that we're going to go over, that you're going to tell us who's new and who's not?
We can do that. I wasn't quite sure what that was, actually.
Yeah, it's been on there for a few months.
I don't know what that is.
I guess it'd be nice for the public to know who's a major player, who's the assistant GM.
We can absolutely do that. No problem.
I thought we had a kind of an agreement to have like a operation and maintenance program report annually. And if not, then I would like to suggest to the commission that we consider doing that. We do have a report on the capital improvement program, and that tells us about new projects. And the operation and maintenance program is just as important and tells us about how projects in the operational phase are working, what the resources are that are allocated to them. It gives us a chance to air out any problems in that area. So I would suggest that we include that annually, at least, just as we do for capital improvements.
Did you want a next month's meeting? Or?
No, it wouldn't have to be next month. Next month already seems a little bit booked up, maybe in June or July. In fact, I'll make a motion that we do that annually. Suggest that to the commission.
Well, it looks like June we have an electric 5-year plan update. Would that be under the umbrella as well, the O&M?
That's capital, isn't it, Mr. Steiger? The electrical 5-year update?
That is capital.
It's
Yeah,
capital.
That's capital.
Would that be doable, Mr. Steiger, is to have the O&M program update in June as well?
We could do that in June, yes.
And then another issue, I think we had brought up in a previous meeting, and maybe I should have brought it up under old business, but I thought there was going to be a discussion at some point regarding staffing and whether you're adequately staffed to meet all of your programs. I think we agreed to have that in the last meeting, but I'll make a motion necessarily that we look at doing that, not necessarily annually, but at least once we should give that a shot, I would think.
Well, I think it's a very good topic for the moment. So I'm going to try to include that in the strategic planning update because it actually is part of our strategic plan.
Okay, very good.
Or do you cover a little bit of that in your budget? Planning or
Well,
budget
staffing
status as well?
Staffing is always covered in the budget.
In the
but
budget.
But I think a more descriptive discussion is in order.
That may include succession planning?
We can
little
include
bit?
succession planning. And again, that's all part of the strategic plan, so that's why I think it's current.
Can I suggest a topic? It doesn't have to be, any specific month, but something that would outline what the onboarding process is for personal electric vehicles, since there will be several vehicles that are going to be coming online in the fall, and we could end up having customers who are adopting those, and those require some infrastructure upgrades in the home that people might not be aware of. So if there's any sort of work that you guys have done on that, I think it would be good to give that some visibility.
Yeah.
And again, I leave it to the president to decide which month, but probably before the fall, before these vehicles actually start coming into the dealers. And I think they're supposed to start in October.
I'll second your motion if it's a motion.
Again, you don't need a motion, just two people to say
indicate your
it's.
It's got us all paranoid.
So sorry.
What would the specific title of that would be? On board?
PEV readiness,
Oh,
personal electric vehicle readiness.
All right, anything else?
I do have one more thing. I know quite a few utilities are expanding their solar program.
Yes.
Including feed and tariff options and maybe possibly looking at ABA 11 for some of the cities. Can we have it agendized so you can let us know what the city's position is, what is Glendale Water and Power's position is, with something like that?
On solar in general?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's taking us way back. We had AB 11 discussion, I think a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So it's good timing that since the bill was approved, I mean, the discussion we had back then was the bill hasn't been approved yet, but now it's been approved. It'll be interesting to hear an update from staff and the city's policy on that. Would that be next month?
Oh.
Can we do it next month?
Whenever.
We've got a pretty heavy agenda.
Yeah.
We can do it.
No, just asking. Well, maybe July. It seems like July has only 2 items so far. Put AB 11 update for July then. Good. Any other ones?
This is actually not relevant to the agenda item. I should have asked this when there was the presentation of the financial update. Just for clarification, there is no plan for a rate increase at this point.
Not on the electric side.
Yeah.
There has been all along an expectation. In fact, we went to City Council at this point almost 2 years ago with a phased-in series of rate increases on the water side.
Okay.
And that's still moving forward, yes.
Okay. Is that something we should have on the agenda forecast?
For water rate update?
Yeah.
What we'll bring it to you as soon as we have it
Okay,
developed.
all right.
Yeah, that'll be proactive. You won't
All
have
right.
to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other items?
I just have a question. So is it my understanding that we will get a AMI update every month, or how often will that happen?
We'll give you an update every month. Some months it will just be a quick update as to how many meters have been installed and that type of thing. And I would assume for the next couple of months that's the case. But you'll also get any updates in terms of where we are with DOE, which is literally unfolding as we move along.
I know that the reason I asked is I know that there's some good work being done in terms of community outreach, and there's going to be a community advisory group formed. It would be good to have that sort of feedback to see what customers are hearing as you see fit as the work is progressing.
But yeah, I think that was the understanding with staff that we'll continue to discuss the smart grid update every month, even though it wasn't on the general forecast. So that was my assumption, that it will be on the reports and information in addition to the other monthly reports that staff is providing. Okay. Any other items? Going once? Okay, so that's done with agenda forecast. See, the next meeting will be on Monday, May 3rd. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.